Hey guys, Todd with 306 Foxbody. So if you have an SN95 car, especially a 94, 95, and you want to put a couple extra gauges in the car, but you don't want a pillar pod, and I noticed there's bezels you can get that have a 3-gauge bezel for underneath the radio, cassette player, whatever, CD player. And I just don't want 3 gauges in my car. I'm putting in a wideband and a oil temperature gauge. So here's a factory bezel, and I guess you'd call this a single din, because a double din would be obviously twice as high. So here's where your radio goes. Now I'm putting my gauges down here. So what I did, I'm using an AEM wideband and an AEM oil temperature gauge. I ended up ordering in an oil filter sandwich plate, if you call it that, and it goes, you guessed it, between the oil filter and the block. So you can see my 1515 Wix oil filter. That sandwich plate is going to go right in there. And this was to tap into the oil flow. If you make a provision where the oil sending unit is, that's just providing pressure, but you may not get the hot oil as immediately as you get it going through the filter. So the one regret I have, if I could give anybody a word of advice, is if you ever have an engine out like I did, I'm kind of kicking myself for not putting a welded on bung with a plug on it on, 1 or 2 spots on the side of the oil pan. Like, let's face it, you just can't do it when the engine is in the car. Some cars you can. It's like when you put the oil drain back for a supercharger. But if you think of this stuff ahead of time, it's just way easier to do it while the pan is off the car. You wouldn't want to do it on the car. It's too much work. So this oil filter sandwich plate, we're going to put that on, and we're going to install the oil temperature gauge, and it'll be sitting beside the wideband. So that'll be the only 2 gauges I think I want in the car. Everything else should be pretty good. And let's look at what we're going to do for that. I'm a big fan of making a lot of my own stuff. It's not always pretty, but it seems to work. I've got a old, well, it's not old, it's never been used. It's a license plate bracket for the front of a Hyundai Santa Fe or some other SUV. Looks like a Santa Fe. I'm going to use this plastic. It's nicely textured. It's in good condition. I'm going to see if I can make a decent looking plate bezel for the gauges. So they're 2 1/16 inch gauges, so that should be pretty good. I saw online I could buy a 3-gauge pod, but I just don't want that. I want to stick with the 2. So anyways, we're going to work on that as well. So when we mount the gauges, it'll look half decent. It's roughly 7.5 inches wide by 2.5 inches high. So what I did is I put tape down just to protect it while I cut it with my jigsaw. I cut it out. I tapered the edges a little bit, or I radiused them, I should say. I found the center, and I took out a gauge face, because it's basically 2 1/16. If you measure it. So then I just traced it out with this to get my circle. Now I'm at the point I want to cut the holes out. But just check this out. It fits in there quite nicely. It actually has a nice textured look to it that looks, it's an OEM type of a texture. I'm leaving the tape on until I get all the cutting done. So the next thing I'll do is I'll cut the holes out. And I noticed, for example, the way these items are, this will be enough to, I'll be able to mount the gauge in that no problem. But I'm just looking, how am I going to mount the panel in here where it'll stay? Because I can mount the gauges in here. I should just do that. But what I'm probably going to do is get a couple pieces of plastic here, 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 and here. And there's likely enough where I can modify this to make it hold the bezel in place as well too. So might have to trim some of this stuff off back here. There's a bit of a ridge. So we'll start cutting the holes out and take it from there. So I just pulled the tape off. You can see the textured finish. Just take a small knife and deburr any little edges that are kind of, hanging on there like that. And then we'll pop a couple gauges in and see how it looks. Okay guys, here's what I did on the back side. So the bezel fits up against the other side, and I poke the gauge through. I took another piece of the license plate cover, and I'm going to set that over top. And then we're going to take, I had to trim the end of this to make it a bit shallower. And basically, and this holds the bezel. It sandwiches the bezel up against the main bezel. So the gauge bezel gets sandwiched into the main bezel and holds the gauge in. I put a little bit of blue Loctite on, just a little bit on the threads so they don't vibrate off in time. And there's our gauges. Hey guys, look what just showed up. We got that oil filter sandwich plate. So this is what is going to allow us to put a sensor in on one of those little bungs on the side for the oil temperature sending unit on the 95. Now here's the things I like about oil temperature. Just say if you hop in your car, and even if the coolant temperature kind of comes up sort of fast, if your internal parts in your engine aren't up to full operating temperature, that engine isn't ready to go. So the analogy I like to use is, if you have a pickup truck and it's 40 below, it's cold out, it's a winter time, and you go to pick up a load of bricks, a pallet of bricks. When the load of bricks goes down on the back of the truck, technically the springs, the leaf springs are cold and they're brittle. They could possibly crack. But if you did that same thing when the truck is in, say, 30 degrees above, because the metal is warmer, it'll work better. It's the chances of it being brittle or cracking or anything happening with the metal parts failing is a lot less. So that's one thing. When you know say if you're at the drag strip and you want to go make a pass, as long as your oil temperature's up to where it should be, you're ready to go. Even if the coolant hasn't come up yet, as long as the oil temperature is there, you're good. The second thing is, just say if you're racing your car, be it drag racing or road course or anything, or even just normal driving, if you have an internal engine failure, the temperature, say if it's at like 180 degrees or 210 or whatever is normal, it will immediately spike. So that's why where the sender is going to go for the oil temperature, it's going to go past the oil flow. So it'll be kind of immediately after it goes into the pan, through the pickup. It's going to be fairly quick. It's going to sense the higher temperature. So let's install that tonight. We'll button up the oil temperature gauge install. Okay, here's our glow shift sandwich adapter. So basically I got to take my oil filter off, take off or add this to the vehicle with this on there, and then plug off all the extra holes that I'm not going to be using. There, I got my sending unit here. We'll thread it in and find a good spot for it and throw it on the car. Okay, there's the item in place. I wanted this top end level, but I wanted the sensor to be nicely up and out of the way from everything else. So we'll put the filter on next, and it's nice and snug, just like they say a filter. Of course, typical guy probably gave it a little extra, but make sure you put some oil on your filter gaskets so it slides on here decently. But yeah, should go on good, and we'll start wiring the sensor after this. I'll put the filter on first. Okay, we got the sandwich plate and the filter in place. What I think I'm going to recommend doing is I'm going to make a line on the sandwich plate and one on the filter, just so when you look in from this angle, you know, maybe if I put it in line with the sensor at a glance, you'll know that it hasn't moved. There, at a glance, just in case something is moving and needs to tighten, you'll know it. And of course, the guy has to check his work when you're done. Okay, here's where we're at. Here's my signal wire. The sensor plug isn't on the end yet. I picked up some brand new wire loom. I think it's 1/4 inch. We're going to put that on the wire, and then we're going to, right there, that's where we're going to poke a hole in that big grommet. And that big grommet is right there. There's that bad boy. Focus. We're going to poke a hole in it there. Okay, there's my wire. It's ready to go up through the grommet. I put some mechanics wire that I poked through the top of the grommet. Let's see. I put a little bit of dielectric grease on it just to help it go through the grommet. Right there. Look at that, like a champion. Yeah, so we got the black part coming through, the shielded part. So I can pull it back a little bit. Okay. I'll have to fasten it up here somehow, just so it's tucked up out of the way and not going to interfere with anything. So I should have enough. Now I'll put my my shielding on here, the plastic loom as well. Okay guys, here's our end result. You can see the sandwich plate. I soldered the sensor plug onto the end of the wires that I pulled through, and then I went along the existing wiring harness I had, and I came across here. There's a harness on an SN95 that comes across here. I went underneath some of the wires here, along over the strut tower, and of course through that grommet. Well, let's see how we did. Check it out. There's our 2 gauges. I had the car running a little while earlier, so we should get some temperature readings. There we go. We got there 123 degrees and 14.5 air fuel ratio. Let's take it for a spin and see what happens. I barely got out of the driveway and I see the oil temperature is already starting to climb. We'll take it for a little run and see what happens. Okay guys, I don't know if you can hear it, but when I accelerate lightly, you can hear my throttle body whistle. Well, I think it's the throttle body. I'm going to probably throw my 65 on just to compare to see if it's gone. And if the noise is gone, we know it's the throttle body, and then we'll try and figure it out. Yeah, you can just hear it. Well, I nicely went through the gears, and now we're at 200 our peak. Well, we got our bezel in, we got our wideband in, and we got our oil temperature in. So next thing is a fuel pump upgrade. We'll keep you guys posted on what's going to go on with the car, but next video should be the fuel pump upgrade. And thanks for watching, and we will catch you in the next video. Cheers.